Hello YouTube, this is Neon, and today my talk is going to be titled Trump on Charlottesville and the Hypocrisy of Progressives. One thing that inspired this was something I saw about the Trump regime. We have a lot of protesters in LA that don't like Trump. Ain't nothing surprising about that. I don't like him. And some people may say, I do, and they may misinterpret this as me defending him. It's not. But just like this whole Trump regime ridiculousness and having to demonize Republicans rather than just saying we disagree with them, we believe that they're wrong, they have to demonize them and make them look like they are devil worshippers and Nazis. So this very same thing occurred in Germany. A German magazine had the audacity of putting a picture of Trump on the cover of their magazine, wrapped up in a flag, doing the infamous Hitler salute. And the title said it was a play off of Hitler's evil book, Mein Kampf. And they called it Mein Trump, or I don't remember the exact, but it was something along those lines. Well, a Jewish organization pointed out the hypocrisy of this. Germany, responsible for killing 12 million innocent people, 6.5 million innocent Jews, is trying to compare Trump to that. Has he rounded up millions of people and slaughtered them? It's ridiculous. Now, this same Jewish organization, I believe they hold, and I'm not sure if it's called the Eli Wiesel Foundation or Wiesenthal. I'm not sure even the name of it. I saw this recently online. But they were saying that this is ridiculous for obvious reasons, particularly coming out of Germany of all places trying to do this. Because there's no comparison. Just because I don't like Trump's stand on transgender rights, on transgender people in the military, on abortion rights, why do I have to make him Hitler? Okay, first thing. Second thing, they said that basically what I just stated, they didn't agree with this stand. They're angry that he didn't condemn Charlottesville. But Germany is the last country to try to demonize someone for being an extreme, out-of-control racist. Now, my opinion on this, the press, we already know the press hates Trump. I didn't like him when he was big and popular with The Apprentice because I didn't think he was a nice person. I never liked Rosie O'Donnell, and I still don't. But when he made the statement he made against her, I thought this is really not a nice person at all. And I like him less than I like Rosie O'Donnell. I liked him less then, I don't like him now, and I don't think he should be president. But he is. I believe that progressives like to give lip service to equal rights for African Americans, for Native Americans, for Latinos, for Asians, right? As long as, particularly for African Americans, they love to give lip service, progressives do. And they're angry because President Trump didn't give lip service. In my opinion, he basically said, I don't really care about what happened in Charlottesville. He lets us know what kind of an individual he is. At least we know he's being honest. He's being honest like the KKK. He's being honest like neo-Nazis. We can avoid them. They're easy to avoid. How do you avoid racism when it's unseen? But it's just like a virus, just like poisoned air, it's just as deadly. It's just as deadly and destructive as the KKK, as white nationalists. He didn't pay lip service, and progressives of the majority Persuasion, which I'm predominantly referring to as white progressives, progressives of the moral progressives of the majority persuasion, they love to give lip service to equal rights for African Americans. However, when low-income housing comes to their neighborhood, and I've seen documentaries about this, time and time and time again, they block us. They do not want us living in their neighborhood. And as one white female, I believe she was a progressive, said, I'm not racist, you know, but there's a lot of those people who are African American, and I don't want to sound racist, but I don't want them bringing the ghetto to our neighborhood. That is destructive against our people. Many progressives of the majority persuasion, they do not hire African Americans. That's racism. That's real racism. Trump, they sue Trump for not allowing African Americans to move in his buildings. I believe this was during the 70s. His buildings that were located in white neighborhoods. We were always, and then we're talking about money to African Americans, by the way. We were always moved to his buildings that were like in Harlem or in African American neighborhoods. That settled out of court. He wasn't convicted, and he didn't admit to anything. Although he agreed to change certain practices. For example, they would put a C on applications of African Americans, which meant colored. That kind of racism I worry about more than the fact that he didn't condemn Charlottesville. That kind of racism affects us much more than him giving lip service to something that he doesn't care about. He doesn't care about Charlottesville. He doesn't. And he was honest about it. We know what he is. But what his company did in preventing us to move into his buildings, that is more dangerous to us. That affects and impacts our lives. There was a Native American reservation that wanted to, or that was in talks to have some kind of a waste disposal or some kind of a dump or something on their reservation, and it would bring this reservation out of poverty. Most of the members on this reservation were living in extreme poverty. Progressive environmental activists went on this reservation that they'd never been on before, dictated to Native Americans on this reservation, don't allow them in there, it's going to destroy the earth. Because Native Americans are so famous for taking care of the planet and taking care of the environment and nature, they ultimately, and I suspect independently, decided that they were not going to have this waste disposal company set up on their reservation, even though the arrangement would have, to my understanding, would have brought in all of the members of this tribe out of poverty. It's interesting that, and as one of the Native American leaders said, we appreciate what these progressives were doing in trying to protect the environment, but they didn't care about the welfare of Native Americans. They never showed an interest in this particular tribe. They'd never been on the reservation before. They had no problem with Native Americans continuing to live in poverty. They put their perception of the wellness of the planet, of the wellness of the land on this reservation above the value of Native Americans. That could be called racist. And we know the press loves to call Trump and Republicans racist. And they never say directly. They would be held liable and possibly would have to pay money. And of course the US worships money. So what does the press do? They'll say, this person says Trump is likely a racist. This organization says Trump is likely a racist. Those progressives could be called racist. I remember watching a documentary about crocodiles in a particular community in a particular country in Africa, and how many people in this community were walking around with missing arms and missing legs because they had to get water from the same river that these crocodiles lived in. And the particular animal rights activist and specialist on crocodiles, he was kind of torn because these crocodiles were needed to be protected, and yet he felt bad that so many of the people who lived along this river as their only source of water had been attacked and were missing limbs, and many had been killed. How can you as a progressive compare the life of a crocodile to the life of a human being, other than to say that's a black African, the crocodile's life is worth more? So as I'm watching this documentary, I'm thinking, how can he be torn? How can he be torn? And my boyfriend and I at the time, we had 2 homeless young men living with us. And no, we were not involved. Certainly I was not in any way, shape, or form involved sexually with them. But we felt bad for them and they needed a place to stay. And as I said this statement about this documentary, these 2 young men who were white, they said, no, that's not true. The life of those crocodiles is what matters, and that's the most important thing, and they need to protect that river for those crocodiles. That's all that matters. I remember shortly after that I told my boyfriend, they got to go. And it was my boyfriend that really wanted to help them out, not me. I was like, they got to go. After they made that statement, they going back on the street. And they did. I kicked them out. We kicked them out, whatever. Maybe I made my boyfriend kick them out. I don't know. These progressive animal rights activists could be called racist. It's funny how we've destroyed all of our wildlife in this country. I do not believe we're a great nation. We're a rich and powerful nation. That's it. We have millions of people who are homeless in this country. Does a great nation deserve to be called a great nation when it does that to the most vulnerable people, lets them live, sleep, and die on the street, and say they deserve it? They're drug addicts and they're lazy. We're not a great nation. In my opinion. I congratulate Colin Kaepernick for not standing for the flag salute. I think he's wonderful. It's sad to me that progressives as well as conservatives think it's okay to attack him through economic racism, which some people would call these progressives economic racists. We're not going to give you a job because you're standing up against police brutality, police getting away with killing African Americans, and you're not going to stand for the flag salute. That could be called racist. Okay, I've talked with numerous progressives of the majority persuasion, predominantly whites. They're against reparations for African Americans. They'll use the red herring argument that we can't afford it. Okay, a lot of times. But the reality is they don't want reparations for us. They don't want racial quotas in the private sector. When I've talked to progressive, and they'll tell me, well, you can't just hire someone because they're black. Is that a racist assumption on part of these progressives that African Americans aren't qualified and can't do the job? That the only possible reason would be because of their skin color that they would be hired? Maybe that's the reason why we don't have African American executives, is because they're not being hired because of their skin color. Many people would call these progressives racist. Racist in a way that really affects and impacts our community, preventing Africa from industrializing so that they can have the prosperity that we have, preventing South America from industrializing, saying that the planet's going to die if people in third world countries begin to live a lifestyle that's comparable to the US. That could be called economic racism. I think that progressives really need to get it together. And I will tell you that there are whites or progressives of the majority persuasion that agree with me that we need reparations for people of color. We need a redistribution of wealth in this country in the form of racial quotas in the private sector, all the way up to executive positions. So there are freedom fighters out there who are of the majority persuasion and progressive, and I bless them. Thank you. Best wishes.